an Oracle partner as well as a customer helping us out today and going to be doing the bulk of the presentation. This is a data center migration to AWS Cloud, a customer's experience. So the webinar overview is essentially we're going to give you an ability to answer, put in questions. We're going to answer those at the end. So feel free to put all your questions in there and be confident they'll be answered at the end. And then also when this presentation is done, you'll see it up on the YouTube channel, AWS YouTube channel, as well up SlideShare. So what we have today, myself is Tom Leszewski. I'm a solution architect with AWS, supporting our partner Apps Associates. We have Through from Apps Associates going to be presenting, and then Chris from RISO presenting how they migrated their e-business suite as well as some other applications, Oracle applications to the cloud. So what we're going to cover, I'm going to just do a brief introduction, and for those folks, I realize there's a lot of folks on the line that understand AWS. I've worked with AWS. I'm going to just point out some services that we're using in this project, as well as make a little announcement on some cost reductions that we have. And then Apps Associates is going to get into their approach to migrating, and then RISO is going to show you how Apps Associates use their approach to migrations in order to migrate their data center into the cloud. And then we're going to do a Q&A. So this here shows you, and I'm not going to cover all these things obviously, but it shows you the breadth of services. AWS has been around since 2006, and in that time we've gone from just a few services to a large number of services. And the thing I want to point out here is that folks like Apps Associates, a partner, will help you along with AWS to decide what services make sense when you're migrating your data center into the cloud. So in this case, we're using some of the core services, obviously, like EC2, like S3 for backups, like Glacier for long-term archiving, elastic block storage with provisioned IOPS. So we have a lot to offer here, but we're going to drill down very quickly into what made sense and what was used in this particular environment. And obviously at the top you'll see ecosystem partners, and partners like Apps Associates play a key role in deploying these customer applications into AWS. And as you know, probably know, AWS is well known for a number of things that it gives you when you move into the public cloud, including elasticity, the ability to go global, the ability to fail fast. And one of those key sort of tenets that it provides you is cost reduction. And we continue to pass on these economies of scale we have by building out our data centers and reducing our costs. And we like to pass those on to the customers. So you can see our storage. I talked about some of these that we used. S3 was used in this particular project, and there's a huge reduction here. So this savings is going to be passed on to RISO. Same thing with EC2. The M class, M3, M1 class is a highly used class when you move relational databases like Oracle database into the cloud, and there's price reduction there. And then RDS, if you want to use a managed service, Oracle managed service on us, cost reductions there along with Elastic Cache and EMR. Now I'm going to turn it over to Through from Apps Associates, and he's going to cover their approach to application data center modernization.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Through Saragopan from Apps Associates. Hope everyone is able to see the screen. So let me start with a quick introduction of Apps Associates. We are a US-based company with operations in Europe and Asia and the Middle East. Since 2002, we've been helping customers with various business and technology consulting services, and we have a strong partnership with Amazon Web Services specifically to help customers adopt cloud computing platform. So let me move right into the core of our presentation today. Why cloud infrastructure as a services or cloud computing in the context of a data center migration. As you see on this slide, there are various actions and problems that enterprises typically face. And as far back as 2006, Gartner had reported that the IT organization is spending a significant amount of their time just keeping the lights on. Recent studies have shown that this is still more than 50% of the time that IT spends. I'm going to invite Chris Gattoni from RISO pretty soon to actually talk about what the challenges they faced, similar to what you see on this slide here, and how did they overcome those challenges and meet their goals by leveraging the AWS platform. So let me move on into some of the considerations and questions that come up about cloud adoption in general. One of the first questions always is around security. The control of the environment is with the services provider. So how does this work? A services provider like Amazon Web Services have designed and built and are managing their cloud infrastructure very much in alignment with various industry practices, compliance, regulations, some of the best practices. So as a consumer of these cloud infrastructure services, the organizations are going to get the benefit of all of these controls in place. And they're able to leverage these to meet their own internal controls and requirements. However, what I would like to show in the next slide here is the bottom half is essentially what IaaS providers such as Amazon Web Services would provide. And these processes and controls are essentially hypervisor and below. It's a joint responsibility or shared responsibility, as I would like to say, essentially with the organizations either by on their own or in partnership with, say, service providers such as Apps Associates, to build the nuts and bolts, your application, your various controls on top of this infrastructure in compliance so that you are able to still extend the same controls over. Many organizations have pretty robust controls. You're already running PCI compliant applications and various others internally into your organizations. It's just a question of understanding and extending those same controls onto your cloud services platform. The second question that come up often is, I have significant investment. What and how would I do to extend into the cloud and still sort of get more out of the investments that we have? So the hybrid architecture is essentially what we propose and recommend. And what exactly do we mean by that? So in this diagram, we show your corporate data center infrastructure internally. And you are now able to extend and connect to say Amazon has several regions, about 9 regions, soon to be 10 across the globe. You're able to extend and connect to those regions and then provision infrastructure within those regions for application workloads and then integrate with your on-premise infrastructure and applications. This approach lends itself to sort of migrate based on your business requirements and timings and develop a roadmap and a strategy to gradually get there. Quite often these opportunities to do this kind of a hybrid extension would be around, say, a hardware refresh cycle coming up, new applications that require additional investments in IT infrastructure, or perhaps identifying test, dev, DR kinds of workloads and small application workloads and move them into this kind of an infrastructure. So let's talk more about that. Where and how to get started. The approach that Apps Associates would recommend for a data center migration in the context of what we're speaking about today is to first and foremost understand the applications, the workloads that we're going to move to the data center. It is those applications that are going to dictate pretty much all aspects around network and security, right, the internal controls and the compute platforms that we're going to build and deploy in any kind of a cloud migration strategy. So to start with, classify those applications, understand what is required for those applications to operate, and then identify the target application and platform, and then finally move into that migrate phase, which is essentially going to be that building up the cloud roadmap strategy and moving in. So let's look at a few details around what we mean by this four-step process. So a typical way of classifying applications could be around, ERP, general business applications, the packaged applications, or the custom, test dev, DR kind of footprints compared to the production applications there. It's important to look at them because the requirements or the dictates around these applications differ. Some of them could be cloud ready and ready to be able. Some of them could require some amount of customization to rework. Some of them are very easy to move and operate and run with. Some of them you may choose to sort of work in a hybrid architecture. So it's very important to start with that classification and then understand what are the requirements, all the way from storage, compute capacity, how are they integrated with each other, right? The architecture, database nodes, application tier nodes, load balancing, clustering, and of course, the security and compliance regulations to meet the various requirements around those applications. With that, we then move into the third phase, essentially, is to build a dependency tree. I think this is an important piece of a cloud strategy to build a roadmap. By kind of building a dependency architecture, you're now able to determine those low-hanging fruits, applications perhaps that are maybe the primary candidates for moving into it. And as we move further into this chain, fully understanding the various integration requirements, it sort of allows us to start building the roadmap as to how we will start adopting some of the cloud computing infrastructure into enterprise. With these things done, we now go into the migrate phase, where with the data that we have just discovered, analyzed, and built, armed with that, we're now able to look at the cloud vendors available, understand the requirements of the application, and map to the capabilities these various platforms provide, and then move into a pilot phase. It's very important to build those small pilots and test with them and work with them, and then move on to identifying your core group of IT technologies within the enterprise and get that team familiar with the nuances of that specific cloud platform that you've chosen. Then you move into the actual migration phase, moving those applications and getting the integrations to be maintained as you move in. And of course, most importantly, the whole idea of moving in here to leverage what cloud computing has to offer today, able to build in those elastic capabilities into your architecture so that, say, for example, auto-scaling, allowing you to expand or decrease the compute capacity you want to utilize, or start and stop environments based on when they're required, and various things like that. Essentially, moving into sort of optimize and migrate and manage and run your applications in the enterprise. To that effect, Apps Associates has built a program of cloud adoption around these 4 core elements, starting from a roadmap design strategy to a POC and enablement phase to understand the return on investment, and then to actually deploy, migrate, and turn it over to the IT infrastructure team, or in some cases also help operate and manage their cloud infrastructure for these customers. So with that, I'm going to invite Chris Gattoni from RISO to talk about what they did, what were their challenges, and how did they migrate to the cloud platform.
Thank you, Thiru. Hello, everyone. I'm the IT director with RISO. RISO is a Japanese-based company. We manufacture, distribute, and sell high-end digital printers and digital duplicators. I am responsible for basically our entire infrastructure, IT infrastructure for North American operations. So about 18 months ago, I was facing some significant challenges. Our hardware was reaching end of life. I was supporting, obviously, numerous warehouses and sales offices between Canada and the U.S. I was juggling multiple vendors with different support contracts that kind of end date at different times of the year. And we also had numerous legacy applications running on that old hardware that was still critical to the company. And unfortunately, we're kind of a small staff with a big environment. So it was getting to the point where I noticed we were just spending more and more time, like you said earlier, keeping the lights running than providing value to the rest of the company goals. So we contracted with Apps Associates, and we needed a plan to get us out of this problem. I mean, as I said before, at the time, I had multiple VPN tunnels to all my offices. My data center had I had about 4 racks worth of servers in the data center with SAN storage, Cisco networking equipment. We had domain controllers at each of our offices across the country. And obviously, Oracle is our ERP system, which is critical to my company, but was also running on old hardware. So we determined AWS is the best solution for RISO. So going from that, what do we look like today? I leveraged the east and west regions of AWS. East is where we're keeping our production environment, and we're using the west region as a DR for all our critical applications. I was able to get out of the hardware business, which is really the goal I was looking for, and then I leveraged my resources, my system admins, to work on projects for the company. We migrated our platforms to EC2. We created a VPC, and we set up all the security between the VPNs and the routing and the access list on that. And we also migrated off on-premise backups to the cloud utilizing S3 and Glacier. And after about 6 months of burn-in time where we kind of monitored our usage and costs, we determined that reserve instances made sense for us in order to get some savings. So we took a handful of servers that we have to keep running 24/7, purchased RIs for those, and we also set up scripts to shut down non-critical servers and applications in the cloud on the weekends and holidays, thereby getting savings on those as well. On the network side of things, we determined BGP tunnels were the best for all my offices connecting up to AWS. I think Amazon has since rolled out the ability to use IPsec tunnels if that works for your environment. But we went with the BGP, and we're pretty happy with it. And as we rolled out AWS to the rest of my offices and warehouses, we kind of stuck with that model. So how do we get to the cloud? Well, after we contacted apps, we took a real hard look at all our costs: cooling, electricity, hardware maintenance, who our vendors were, and really got an entire footprint of what my costs were, operational costs were. And then we looked at all the applications like Dhiru mentioned and all of the dependencies on it and determined what the connections to all those and how they all tied in together. And from that, apps came to me with a plan how to get from A to B. So the first thing we did was a POC, very important. We designed the VPC, and we set up the BGP VPN tunnels, connecting it to my corporate office. And then we massaged the security to where we needed to be, and then we developed the backup operations. We didn't go live with backups yet, but we had a plan at this stage. And then finally, we migrated over our Oracle dev and test environment to the cloud and tested thoroughly Oracle, since that's our most important application running in AWS. Once that was signed off by myself, apps, and upper management, we moved forward to the build phase, where we started rolling out the VPC and the BGP tunnels to the rest of the offices, and we started building up the EC2 instances that would eventually hold the rest of our applications, and we started making use of the provision IOPS for some SQL servers and our production Oracle environment. We also found with some of those legacy applications that it wasn't a just simple one-to-one migration to AWS. So apps was able to develop for us some custom AMIs with some older operating systems and drivers. And by doing that, we were able to migrate some applications that I did not think we were going to be able to get up to the cloud. We were able to successfully move them up there. And then we finally implemented our cloud backup instances. We started using Snapshot, and we also got rid of our on-premise tape storage and started pushing all our backups to S3 storage. And then the final part was we looked at our Windows services. We migrated a domain controller up to the cloud, and we started moving all our Windows services up there. Not all of them we determined made sense for Amazon. For instance, our on-premise Exchange environment, we decided to move that to Office 365. We moved our production Oracle EBS up there, and then we rolled up the rest of our applications. So I kind of want to talk a lot about this slide here because it was probably about a year project to start from analysis to where we are today. And it was probably one of the best things I did from an IT management standpoint. during this time, we also moved offices. So I was essentially able to relocate my data center, lower my data center footprint, all with no interruption to production. It was a huge success for me and my team. We reduced our backup costs a lot by getting rid of tapes, getting rid of off-site storage, and just pumping everything out to the cloud. And S3 storage is much cheaper than off-site storage. That money we would have spent for our hardware refresh for our data center, we were able to roll those dollars into this project and do it for much cheaper. I lowered my operating expenses, and I was also to get rid of some of my maintenance contracts that I was holding for some of that hardware, thereby reducing those costs. Another thing that's been great about this service since we've gone live with it, and it's something I was never able to do before, is for instance, I had our solutions architect come to me, and he's like, we need a server with multiple OSs on it to test our print drivers. And he's like, we need the hardware, he's giving me all the specs and stuff like that. And before AWS, to do something like that probably would have taken us a week or more. And I told him, I could have this for you within a half an hour. Just simply spin up a server, an AMI, install your drivers, do your testing, and then we could simply just shut it down, and we don't have to pay. All we did is pay for what we used. I was not able to offer that in the past, and it was something that was a real eye-opener for some of the other executives in the company who's not familiar with this technology, the capability of it. And by showing that, we could start to leverage this for more company products, and it just makes the IT department look all the better. So I thank you for your time. Having said that, I'm going to send it back to Tom, and if you guys have any questions, I look forward to answering them. Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Chris. That was awesome. I don't know if everyone can see my screen here. Someone can give me a heads up in the.
Yeah, you can see it, but
all right.
Don't say stuff.
Let me put it in slideshow mode here. Does that look prettier?
Much better.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Chris. That was great. I hopefully you caught all that. I know I did a pretty quick intro, but the things that Chris talked about just drove home what I talked about at the beginning in terms of, I talked about cost a little bit, obviously, and he mentioned cost quite a few times, but he also brought up a really interesting point. You know, he talked about going not necessarily global, but at least regional, how easy it is to go and do things across regions, which is difficult to do in your current data center configuration, right? If you want to put stuff out on the West Coast in the United States, it's simple for him. So and he also talked about agility, which is something I didn't mention, which is another key tenet of AWS in the cloud, is that being able to test out those print drivers in a few hours instead of a few weeks. So agility is a big thing. And then from a technical perspective, something I didn't bring up in my first slide is obviously I talked about storage, like elastic block storage for storing your database files, S3 for doing backups, which Chris talked quite extensively about doing backups and how they do both on-premise, if you caught that, both on-premise backups as well as their backups, obviously, of their stuff that's running now in the AWS Cloud. And then he also mentioned, of course, VPC and VPN, if you're not familiar with that. That's extending your data center through, talked about, you know, extending your data center hybrid cloud. So you can set up a virtual private network inside of AWS, and that's going to be an extension of your data center or your host office. So I think Chris really did a great job of tying it all together. If you want to learn more here, this slide shows an architecture center. There's a bunch of reference architectures around doing DR, just like what Chris talked about. So doing DR in the cloud, how do you do that? We have a reference architecture for that, as well as things like, you know, running websites, typical type of things that people are familiar with in the cloud. And then storage options. We talked about the different storage options, so you can go learn more about what S3 is as opposed to Glacier and EBS. And the security often comes up, as Drew mentioned. So read that security white paper is a good one. And then if you want to get more detail on what Drew talked about, you can go to the your applications to the cloud. And then test drive labs. is a great opportunity for you to try different products, such as Oracle eBusiness Suite or the Oracle database, or even SAP, Microsoft products. All the enterprise products, you can try them for like 4 or 5 hours just to see them run on AWS. And so I would take a look at the test drives as well. So if you want to connect with Through and Apps Associates, here's and you'll get a copy of these slides, so you'll be able to take a look at it. And then Chris has his email up there as well, which is much appreciated that we're being totally transparent here on how to get a hold of us. I think right now what we're going to do is do a quick poll, and then we're going to answer your questions. I think we don't have a lot of time to answer questions, so here's some contact information for Through. But let's get the poll up, and then we can start to answer your questions.
Hi, Tom. This is Maya with the webinar organizer. We already took care of the poll, so
oh, you did?
Q&A, yes.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
I have some questions here from some attendees. Tina, you asked if AWS is managed by myself or have we contracted Apps Associates or someone else. We have contracted with apps to help manage our AWS environment. For instance, when I mentioned how we kind of scripted so non-critical applications and server gets shut down on the weekends, that was something that they were able to do for RISO. Apps is a great company. I treat them like an extension of my own department. I have control over my AWS environment as well, but they also manage it for me. Same goes with the patching of our applications that reside in AWS. Maintenance, that's one of the things that's nice about it. If you're referring to hardware maintenance, there is none in AWS. And God forbid something should happen, as long as you have good backups and taking snapshots of those AMIs, you could quickly spin them up again if an instance, for whatever reason, should just die on you. Andy asked me about why I chose the Office 365 over moving exchanges to AWS. Not so much an AWS issue with moving exchange. At the time, my Microsoft Enterprise Agreement was coming up, and I saw some savings there to move off of just having standalone EA agreements for offices. The Exchange hardware was already old, so I basically just migrated a lot of my licenses and CAL licenses over to an Office 365 subscription. And that's actually been a great success story for me as well. All the users are very happy with that.
All right. I have a couple of questions here. One is on database security. Do you recommend for databases on AWS Cloud? We didn't get a lot into the security around AWS, but we have something called security groups, which is essentially a firewall around that EC2 instance. You can also put that database in a private subnet, and you can do standard what you do on premise, and you put NACLs on it. So security groups, NACLs. You can also do like things in the Oracle database if you want to do authentication or authorization through like Oracle Internet Directory. You can do that, or you can just do the database authentication and authorization just through the standard username and password if you want to. There was also a question on PCI compliant apps. We are PCI compliant. One thing you need to be cognizant of whether those tools or vendors, if you're using third-party systems on top of AWS, whether those are PCI compliant. But we are a PCI compliant platform. I do have a question also on backup strategy for Windows Server. I think we're running close on time, and I think it was Darren, if you could just fire that question off to us so we can get back to it. I think we'd probably need a little bit more detail on that.
I have a good question here from Raul and Lyles, and they're kind of similar. They're asking if I had any issues with migrating. We did actually have some issues, to be perfectly honest. My ERP system was running on some legacy hardware with Linux 4. Well, at the time, the marketplace did not have any that flavor of Linux. So with Apps Helps, that's where I mentioned in the slide, we had to create a custom AMI, a wrapper, if you will, and then we migrated that wrapper up, and that worked for us. I also had some Hyper-V machines that we tried to use some of the canned AWS tools to transform a Hyper-V machine into an AMI. We had some issues with that, and we determined it was easier just to spin up a brand new instance up in the cloud and do a backup and restore to it. So we'll spin up the instance, install the application, and then just do a restore up to it. And that kind of really worked for us.
Thanks a lot, Chris. I think, are we short on time right now, Maya? I think.
Yes, we are short on time, but
okay.
All questions will be answered by App Associates and AWS and RISO because we capture all these questions, and so no question will go unanswered. So if you'd like, we can conclude this presentation and reach out to our audience later via email.
Yeah, the last thing I have up on the slide here now is just a short survey. It'd be great if you did the survey. Always like to get feedback. Always want to know ways we can improve this. And I do see the other questions up here. Please do send us to all three of us, so that we make sure that we get the right people involved to answer your questions. I appreciate your time. It's been a great webinar. I appreciate Drew and Chris being on.